Moriden Athluan.
The champion of Kinneret. Moriden showed the beauty of nature by finding renewal for the great and glorious Gildergreen of Whiterun, providing a place of worship for all manner of men and mer.
The champion of Daibella, the only man to enter the most sacred places of the temple in Markat and live. He, who found out the Daibellian symbol and returned her to the temple, so that all could hear the will of the great goddess.
The messenger of Mara, whose small words and influence sparked two of the greatest love stories of all time in Skyrim.
Moriden was at the height of his goodly deeds when word reached him of a new threat to Skyrim and its people.
Like the mighty champion of the people he had become, he looked up to the role of the people's champion once again and set off to destroy the vampire threat.
Come closer and hear the story of how he destroyed one of the oldest threats to
Still
man
searching
and
for stories about me, I see. I hate to disappoint you, but this portion of my story, you won't find a single bard who knows what he's talking about. That's fine now. We have time, my friend. I can tell it far better than they can, as they tell it for entertainment, not because it is truth. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. "23 Suns Dusk, 4th Era, 201. Crossing the Soul Cairn once again, we made only 2 stops, one to give the pages back to the supposed Saint Jube, and another to take care of a bit of summoning. I'd found 3 pieces of a gem, and during the exploration of the cairn I had seen a place that would fit the gem perfectly. It ended up being a stronger version of the things we'd been fighting already. Nothing of real note, apart from it calling itself the Reaper. By the time we reached the portal again, I was pretty sure we'd been in here for far longer than I'd like. It had certainly felt like days, but, well, time is strange in the realms of oblivion, so for all I know, it's only been a single day in the real world. My world. Regardless, it will be a relief to get out of this place and back to the castle, even if Castle Volkihar will never be my home. I think it might have had a chance at it when I first got there. Harkon, however, will never let me live. I'd be a threat to his power. Back in Tamriel and Skyrim, Serana and I had to have a talk. It was a hard one, more so for her than for me. But it needed to happen. She has become more and more infatuated with me, and apart from that becoming, in time, a weakness in us both that can be exploited, I simply do not have those kinds of emotions toward her. I wasn't brutal about it, but I did make it clear that we could exist as allies and friends, but nothing more. I could almost see her collapse a little inside, but this is how it must be. I will not be like others have been to me. Leading her on will only lead to more pain in her future, and I would not wish that upon her. I had thought that things would be relatively simple now. The Elder Scrolls were found. Valerica had revealed enough to show me that Lord Harkon is not to be trusted at all, and I had a moth priest at my beck and call to read the prophecy. I should have been able to race ahead of Harkon, find Auriel's bow, and prevent this prophecy he seeks to enact. I should have known it would be anything but simple. In this case, the reason is simple ignorance of consequences. When my thrall read the first scroll, he had not done any of the preparation or ritual that he normally would have to prepare. He was able to read it, yes, but the consequences were unavoidable. He is now irrevocably and completely blind. However, in an effort to please me, he has told me of another way that they may be read, a ritual in a place he calls an ancestral glade. There is one in Skyrim, of course, on the southern reaches of Falkreath. I have kept this information to myself for now, and with Serana we will make our way there to hear the prophecy in its complete form. Then, only then, will we decide how to proceed. To keep Harkon from suspecting anything, we will depart for Solitude first. I have been tipped off by another vampire about a pair of rings that can increase my vampiric abilities. That, and the continuing fight against the Dawn Guard and Vigilance, will be more than enough excuse for us to depart once again, especially as he is unaware that we now have all 3 scrolls. I won't say that we raced away from the castle, but we certainly did not waste time. The further we get before Harkon learns we were back at the castle, the better. Though he has no reason to think we have found Valerica or the 3rd scroll, that doesn't mean that his paranoia won't kick in either. The first of the 2 rings was carried by a Spriggan at a lake on the high side of the ridge, facing the road that runs between Solitude and Dragon's Bridge. It wasn't challenging, I didn't think, though I did find another who had been crushed by a tree that, from the looks of it, had been dropped on her deliberately. Didn't know her? Never will either. But if she was paying attention from her little slice of the afterlife, she'll know I avenged her. If that means anything. After a brief stop in Solitude, the 3 of us made quick plans. Valet needs to be taken to Whiterun, if for no other reason than to get her out from underfoot. Plus, I want to see the reunion. From what she has said so far, Belethor is not going to enjoy it. But I certainly will. From there, the second of the 2 rings, then up to Windhelm to repair the file, and I also want to take a look for the last of the 3 shrines. See if it points to silent moons like the other 2 did. Harkon, if he has figured out where we're going, is likely to send agents south towards the Glade. We, therefore, will head east and turn south to Whiterun at the crossroads. It's a longer route, but as I no longer trust Harkon or his intentions, no matter the gift he gave me, anything that might put him off our trail is a thing to be tried. To the west we then rode. As the sun began to set, I realized what the day was missing. And almost on cue, another dragon showed up. This one wasn't bright. It made its attack as I was passing through a border station, ensuring that all fighting men and women in the area would be arrayed against it. The result was predictable. Belethor's goods was already long closed when we entered the city, but even Lale knew where her brother would be, at the Bannered Mare, getting drunk. The first part was true, though the second may not have been. He had both Arcadia and Isolde at his table, and their conversation was either one of the deepest ones about their trade I've heard, so deep that I barely understood any of the terms they used, or they were drunk, and all 3 of them pretending to understand each other. Belethor was aware enough, however, to understand when I told him I'd brought his sister home. Finally. He thanked me, of course, and gave me the grand sum of 100 septums for the deed. I had literally gone to oblivion and back, and this... I was beside myself with anger, but somehow managed to keep it down. I was about to storm away when Lale pulled me to the side. She wasn't going to deal with her brother tonight, but I could see she had plans for the morning. In the meantime, she apologized for his stinginess, as well as being unable to do anything about it. Given she's been in the Soul Cairn for a very indeterminate length of time, her position, at least, was understandable. She did give me a few tips on trading. She'd learned a lot of those in recent months, and assured me that, when she got done with him, Belethor would regret just about everything he had ever done in life, including being born. I was still angry, but as this was likely the best result I could now hope for, I nodded and left the mare. I had more important things to deal with, and, really, it wasn't about the money anyhow. It was the complete lack of respect that angered me, and that man will never respect anyone, except, possibly, Lale, after she's had her say. The second ring was located in a giant camp near the western watchtower, a place called Secunda's Kiss, for reasons that have never been adequately explained. I would assume that that is not what the Giants would call it, so it must be some local story or reference that I am not familiar with. Giants at night, however, I was not willing to risk much with. Yes, I had, apparently, once traded a goat for a giant's toe, but I wasn't going to try to accomplish anything like that again, not with 3 giants in the camp. I considered my options, and there weren't many. Walking in wasn't going to go well. Sneaking in might get me closer, but if it went wrong, it would be a disaster. That left only one approach. With the giants dead, I leisurely entered the camp and took the ring I sought from a chest in the back of the hollow near the campfire. Just to the north of the Nightgate Inn, there is a mountain pass. 2 peaks stand on either side, and I was certain that atop the eastern peak would be the Dwemer shrine I was seeking. It took hours to find a way to scale the mountain. In many places it was impossible, too steep to even attempt to find a way forward. I had the hours needed, though, and slowly made my way to its top. I was not disappointed by what I found, though the pair of ice wraiths that waited for me were not fans of my arrival. After sending them into eternal sleep, I activated the switch on the side of the Dwemer sculpture. As with the first 2, a beam of light lanced out across the landscape. As high up as I was, it was even easier to identify the direction, though I'd already known what it would be. Silent moons. It seems I must return to the bandit stronghold, and the site of one of my greatest failures. 24 Sans Dusk, 4th Era, 201. Before heading back towards Whiterun, I returned to the White File and turned over the needed items to the alchemist's apprentice. After he gushed over my accomplishment, which really wasn't too hard to do, he got to work on the repairs. It took some time, as might be expected. The file is, after all, one of the most powerful artifacts of its kind. Repairing it cannot be easy for one who is not a master of the art, as Norelian used to be. In time, however, the alchemist held the file aloft in triumph and showed me how it was filling with liquid as we watched. He admitted it wasn't quite the artifact it had been. He wasn't nearly as good as his master, let alone Karamil, but he could align it to a given type of potion. I had him align it to healing potions, and then he gave it into my keeping. For now it will be housed in the museum. However, I may take it for myself in the future. Depending on how things go, I may be trying to find a way to cast off this vampire gift. The more I've been thinking on it, the more I am concerned that the deal I've made is more to my detriment than it was to my benefit. Silent Moon's camp. I am not used to failure. Not since I've left Windhelm so many months ago. This place, though. This place will always be one that I look on with regret. Here, a young warrior gave her life for me. Some might have said it was Lydia's job to do so. Those who say this may even be right. I, however, should have been protecting her as well. And in this, I failed. Since then, I have gone out of my way to avoid thinking on this. Now I am forced to look upon the site of this failure once again. The bandits have returned, as well as I feared they might. One hopes that they are not as skilled or as fierce as their predecessors, but I cannot make this assumption. I may be more powerful than I was back then, in many ways, but no amount of power can compensate for your own doubts, your own thoughts. I put those in the back of my mind to be ignored as I prepared to once again assault this fortress of a bandit camp. The fighting this time was far more one-sided. I knew the layout of the camp, I knew how to approach the camp without drawing too much attention, and I knew where to camp to be able to shoot them all with near impunity. Such it was that this time, nobody I cared about even remotely died. And while I did leave one or two bandits still alive, I believe, wiping them out was not my purpose. My only destination was the trap door in the floor of the treasury room. Inside was a book. That was all. A book. Initially, I was frustrated. Why would a book, no matter how powerful its words, be protected in such a way? Serana guarded the doorway as I read through it. I pondered the words contained in them, and then suddenly, I understood. The book was useless to most people, those who would remain at home their entire lives. It was written entirely in metaphors, phrases that seemed disjointed. But if you had been to the places referenced, seen the things it spoke of, you could put it together. I didn't have time to work through it all, and some of them are still not known to me, but from just a few moments of study, I was able to learn a bit about smithing I'd not known. With more study, who is to say what I'll learn? Oh, this book is valuable indeed to those who travel the world. Since I knew I still had a frightened audience in the survivors of Silent Moons, I made it even worse for them. I met the first condition of the bargain with Durnevere and summoned him into Mundus. His appearance as he shimmered into existence must have caused the survivors to nearly wet themselves, I'm sure. We spoke briefly, and the old dove taught me the first word of another new shout, Soul Tear. I look forward to seeing what it is capable of. Even more so when he teaches me, eventually, the other two. The Ancestor Glade is on the southern borders of Falkreath Hold, my thrall tells me. And since the place is not a commonly known location, I assumed it would not just be off the main roads. That meant looking for mountain paths, likely ones that aren't traveled much. I found such a one not far from a bandit site, heading up into the mountains south of the main road between Falkreath and Helgen. I spent the time climbing, thinking and conversing with Serana, and though she seemed reluctant to admit it, I finally got confirmation of something I had been beginning to suspect for some time. Back when Harkon gave me his gift, I was too busy seeing the power that went with it. The removal of mortal day-to-day maintenance and abilities that the normal person could never dream of having. I didn't ask myself why he had given the gift. The return of his daughter, after all, was surely enough of an explanation. I've come to realize I was wrong. Harkon would never show gratitude at all, let alone in this form. There had to be another reason, and as the sun fell across Skyrim and my vampiric gifts awoke again, I realized what it was. I was, again, a pawn. I had killed one of his 3 lieutenants and created a void in the power dynamic of the clan. He used me and my eagerness to fill that void, to keep the other 2 lieutenants guessing. There was nothing of merit, or thanks, or anything else, just a new piece on the board used to keep other players from being too aggressive. And if that pawn also got him closer to what he sought, so much the better. Once again, I am dancing to another's tune. I thought I had found something worth dedicating my life to, something that would allow me to be what I wish to be. Again, I find that it is someone else who will pull the strings. Entering the glade, I was struck by a similarity. The cave of the Elder Gleam had a similar feel to this place, though they are miles apart and have very different purposes. The colors, scene, and layout struck me as echoes of each other. Even Serana noticed it. The peace and serenity of this place soak into you almost immediately. My thirst even seemed unimportant walking here. Peace, though. Peace is a lie. I've been taught that. So I ignored it and descended to the bottom of the glade, where I found the draw knife I'd been told to seek. Using it on a nearby tree, one that had clearly been used for this purpose before, though perhaps not recently, I then walked around the cavern with the bark in my hands. Dexian had said the moths would be attracted to me. The swarm that surrounded me and began to alter my very perception of the world around me, though, that I had not fully prepared for or expected. I do not have the words for what happened when I opened the scrolls. Each in succession, each one seeming to paint a vision on my eyes, or rather, they each painted a part of a vision, I think. As each image overlaid the others, I began to see something. A map, I thought, of some kind. On one side, in a deep blood red, the sigil of Markarth. A bright blue line, the rivers, spidered across the view, heading towards yet another blood-red sigil, this one for Morthal. There was nothing to tell me what I was looking at, and yet I was suddenly certain that this map, these images, would show me the way to find Ariel's bow. The Daughters of Cold Harbor are important to this prophecy, but I knew where 2 of these were already. Without the bow, however, none of it mattered. Harkon might get his hands on Serana again, even possibly Valerica. But if I denied him this, denied him possession of the bow, he could do nothing. And thinking on it, I knew he would stop at nothing to get it from me. He wouldn't even think of it as a betrayal. It would simply be the end of a useful pawn, who had played the game as it needed to, and was sacrificed when required. I nearly fell to the ground when the scrolls completed their vision. Serana was the only thing that kept that from happening, and it was she who kept me talking while my energy returned. Darkfall Cave, in the northern reach, is our destination. I'm not sure if the bow itself is there, but that is where I need to start looking. I told her this, and she accepted it as truth with no questions. The conversation we had as I recovered, however... We had talked about Harkon before we entered. She made her opinion more plain now. If we find the bow and bring it back to Harkon, then our usefulness to him is over. Serana is likely to die to obtain her blood, needed for Harkon's version of the prophecy, and for myself, I will have proven myself too strong to be left alive and a threat to him. Both of us would be killed out of hand. which really only leaves us a single alternative. We find the bow, and we rewrite the prophecy to be what we wish it to be. And if Harkon tries to stop us, well, then we kill him. What other choice do we have? As we began to leave the cavern, we were suddenly reminded that Harkon is not the only threat. We had another one that we had been ignoring, believing them to be little more than pests. The Dawn God would be looking into this whole matter as well. We'd stolen the Moth Priest from them, after all, so they had to know there was something large in the works. 3 of them had overheard our conversation, perhaps more. If one of them had been sent back to the fort in Riften, if they had been made aware of what we were seeking and why, then we have a 3rd player on the field. In a way, I would almost rather work with the Dawn God at this point than alone against both. The enemy of my enemy, and all that. Somehow, I doubt they'd feel that way, however. This just got a lot more complicated.